Hey guys, I wanted to check in on my progress writing my new super sibling story. So this is my second video on that process, and I want to talk about more of the writing that I've been doing. So as I get into the process of creating a story, I told you last time, I believe, that I work on an outline. And so I've been working on that outline for a while, trying to kind of massage it and figure out where to take it. I also explained that I was building off of a couple different story ideas. One, which was the family going to Hawaii. That was a trip I had written, a comic that I had kind of outlined a while back. So I went back this week and read through those notes and what that script was. I also have a collection of other notes that I've written over the past few months, just collecting different ideas, gags, really. So little events, little funny things that could turn out to be a part of the story. So I took all that raw material and threw it into a Google Doc. And now what I'm trying to do is organize it into a story structure. And I explained that for me, it's helpful to organize it by using the three act structure and then also thinking about how I want to divide the story into chapters. Because this particular book, I'm trying to organize into a 100 or so page written story with illustrations. So it's not a full-on comic book as much as it's an illustrated mini short story. So as I've been playing around with these ideas, um, been trying to cook up, the different scenarios that play off of the characters. And that's an important part at this stage to me. It's important to allow the characters to drive the events of the story. So, of course, there's a narrator as I write the story, but I really want to make sure that each individual character plays an important part and progresses the story forward. And so what that means is I have kind of a main plot and then a subplot, and I need to make sure that each person, each character plays their part in that portion of the story. So I'm going to show you my Google Doc so you can kind of see how I'm organizing things a little bit. In my way, I tend to just write an outline and then I go back kind of from start to finish and I keep massaging the story as I go. I decided a while back that each one of my super siblings novels would have this introduction at the beginning. And so it's where I explain kind of the premise that the two siblings have their superpowers. Conrad uses his for good, Courtney uses hers for bad, and they've become these rivals. I also think it's important to reintroduce the characters that play a part in the story, just in case someone picks up this book without having read the first two. So I always kind of reintroduce a little bit the characters. And in this case, in chapter one, I decided I wanted to reintroduce mom and dad. And so it's important that their personality comes through at this stage. I want it to be obvious that mom and dad are your typical average parents, busy with their own lives. So they're not very observant. And they don't really notice that their kids have superpowers. And so I want to sprinkle in some reality into that character type. So frankly, I steal from my own family all the time. Uh, I tend to write James Clark from my perspective, the dad, because that's what I am. And I tend to write Donna Clark from my wife's perspective, at least poking fun at her. For example, I put in a little detail here that Donna is very busy, loves to keep herself busy and keep organized. And one of the things she does is she takes care of her roses. And not because the roses are pretty or beautiful, but because she gets to prune them. Um, that's something I tease my wife about. So she likes having rose bushes, yes, because they're pretty, but because it gives her something to cut and prune, right? So, anyways, that goes into a little dialogue, not dialogue, but a little description written about Donna. And then ultimately, that's going to be turned into another little mini introduction into their character backstory, but then also introducing what's going to happen. So, as my outline is going, I decided to throw in the beginning, kind of a turkey trot. So that's going to be the context for one of the little mini adventures because I like early on in the story to have a conflict between Conrad and Courtney that brings out their superpowers. So you get to see them. In this case, I also want to include the grandparents because it was revealed in book two that grandma and grandpa also have superpowers. James and Donna, mom and dad, do not. Superpowers skip a generation. And in the background, kind of concealed, the grandparents have become super mentors for their kids, one good and one kind of bad. So that's going to play into the turkey trot story. And I haven't exactly figured out what's going to happen, but typically Courtney gets upset about something, and it might be some rivalry with someone else where she wants to win. And that's going to set off a chain of events where she lets out her superpowers and does something bad, and then Conrad has to come in and save the day. And so I figure that kind of community event, I've had fun with that in previous stories, and so I want to play around with that as a way of again showing some character elements of the grandparents and the kids and the parents to kind of set it off. And that puts it into a holiday frame, this being around Thanksgiving, because the next part of the story is that the family is going to take their trip to Hawaii, and that's where the main plot is going to happen. And like I said, I went back to an old comic book where I had already kind of planned out that story. And so I'm going to borrow from that. And so I've actually gone back and picked up that script and I'm pulling out the little gags and funny things that I like from that story and I'm putting them in. Oh, yeah. One more thing I want to flesh out in this book is I really want to explain a little bit more of Grandma and Grandpa's superpowers and their backstory. So in one of the chapters here, there's going to be a little bit of a flashback kind of tied to that first turkey trot story where you see a little bit more of their history. So obviously this isn't very interesting to look at. I'm just scrolling through text, but you can see that I have a lot of notes. And so the difficult part at this stage of the game is converting those notes into written narration and dialogue. And I guess one of the things that I wanted to talk about was just kind of getting in the mood to write. What that means for me is kind of getting into a quiet place and then playing music. I like listening to soundtracks while I'm writing. I've noticed over the years that when I'm drawing and painting, I love 80s music, of course. So I've got my tunes going. But when I'm writing, I can't have lyrics. So I can't be listening to lyrics while I'm writing. So I just have to have music. And the simplest thing to do is to just put on a station that has, you know, Star Wars, Harry Potter, basically John Williams and whoever else out there with some good soundtrack music that seems to be really subtle and allows me to kind of unwind a little bit and write. And a friend of mine gave me this advice a long time ago. He said that, an artist, what you do is you kind of, craft and edit, erase and draw. Or as a sculptor, let's say Michelangelo, you have a slab of marble, and then you have to reveal the sculpture that's inside. So you have that slab, and then you start carving away the edges until you reveal that sculpture. And as my friend would say, he has to build the block of stone first before he can chip away at it. And what that means to me is you have to write a lot of junk on the page first before you can kind of chip away and get down to the essence of what you're writing. And so, with how random my notes are and the way that I'm kind of putting together a variety of sources for this current story, it takes a while to kind of sift through that. So, I'm trying to finish chapter 1 and 2 this week. Like I said, I've kind of spaced out the main events, and now I'm going back in and filling it in. And it can be a little demoralizing, frankly, when you realize you've spent an hour and you've only written 2 paragraphs. Um, I've become comfortable with that. Drawing is much more immediate for me, so I can draw and I can move that pretty quickly and get to something recognizable. Writing is not that way. And so for me, it's a little bit draining and demoralizing to write. You could put all this creative energy into it and then realize it's garbage and you have to abandon it. So that's a disappointment. I don't treat my drawings that way. I'm a little bit more precious about drawing, much more confident. So when I do a drawing, I know I'm going to like what I get. With writing, it's not that way. And so I've noticed that when I get into a writing process, um, I have to I have to just limit my time. So I have to put in an hour or two and then do something else because my energy level, my creativity, it diminishes over time and it frankly wears me out to write. So I need to move on to a different activity to kind of recharge before I write again. So I'm acting like this is some amazing thing. It's not. It's a kid's book. It's not that great prose. I'm not a writer, but I do think I can tell stories. So I like descriptive language. I like fun, funny things. And so I think I can write that. But again, I'm not so pretentious to take myself so seriously. I'm not really that. Uh, I'm not a writer. I'm a comic book writer. So, anyways, that's where I'm at. Um, I'm into the meat of it now, trying to write it out. When I have a script, I'll even share more pieces of it so you can see. But like I said, aren't any pretty pictures yet. It's all in here, just trying to get it out there. All right, so maybe that's interesting. Hopefully that helps you as you're working in your process. And I'll check in with you next week and let you know where I'm at. See ya.